Well, hi, everyone, and welcome back to Speeding Through History. We're once again here with Don Gamble. We're going to talk a lot about something we started last time, and that is talking about some of the announcers in the area. But once again, Don, we have to start on a sad note. In fact, sad note times two tonight. Marjorie Kennedy of Mars passed away recently. That's Chuck Kennedy's mother, and also we were made aware that Dal Carnahan's dad, Ron, had passed away the 26th of February at 91. Thoughts on those two?
Well, Dal's dad was a great guy. Um, he and his wife had been married for 70 years, and they were very supportive of Dal. They would make many visits to Lernerville when either when we were doing a tribute or when he was just announcing, and just great people. I always enjoyed talking to him. He loved basketball, and I mentioned once before that Dow, which is an unusual name, was named after Dow Fisterwald, who I think was a famous golfer, but I'm not sure. But 70 years is a long time to be married. I
Yeah.
commend him for that.
Good for them. And Chuck Kennedy's mom, another one that lived a nice long life, 93 years old, patriarch, I guess you'd call her, or matriarch rather, I guess you'd call her of the Kennedy racing family.
Right. Nice lady. Just the whole Kennedy family, just great people with a long history in racing, going way back to Bob Kennedy and maybe even before that. I'm not aware of anybody before Bob Kennedy, but there's been a lot of Kennedy since then.
Well, we're going to try to clear that up at some point because I think I mentioned down at the World of Wheels show back in January, I bumped into Brittany Kennedy, Chuck's daughter, and she mentioned Chuck as being a possible guest on this program. And I said, I'm all for it. As long as you can hook him up with Zoom, we can sit down. Kennedys have a lot of history, as you said, and Chuck can certainly be the arbiter of it, and fill us in on everything. So let's jump to announcers in the area. Now, you and I established last week that we agreed wholeheartedly on one thing, and that is that Bill Steinbach Sr. and Dal Carnahan, two of the best to ever sit behind a microphone, and I would call them one and one A in terms of being the best around here. My opinion, maybe my opinion only, but I think you may agree. Coming in a very close second has to be Mike Lisakowski.
Yeah, Mike, he was amazing. He announced that Lernerville, Pittsburgh, Jennerstown, the Rush Series, and he would always do speed weeks in Florida. But my favorite Mike Lisakowski story was one night at Pittsburgh. There was a group of us in the press box, and Mike, he likes to eat, and he was coming in to get some nachos and cheese, and he had his back to the track while he was filling up his plate, and he never skipped a beat. And Dick Curry, myself, Bob Miller, we're looking, this guy's unreal. But he filled up his plate, turned back around, went into the announcer's booth, and picked up, I can't say where he left off because he never left off.
He didn't. I watched Mike at Motordrome from time to time when I'd be there when it was Motordrome on the asphalt, and he announced there. You and I know what it is like to go up and down bleacher steps. It's not the easiest thing in the world. To be able to go down bleacher steps on the way to Victory Lane and name every sponsor on the car of the driver you're about to interview, never miss a beat, never
Yeah,
sound like he's sucking wind like you and I are because you're
yeah.
so out of breath on the steps. Yeah, Mike was incredible. I have so many Mike stories that I could tell. One of them, he would speak from time to time, would he not, at the promoters workshop in Florida? Is that right?
Yes. Well, how that came to be, the fellow running the workshops at the time wanted someone to take pictures. And I suggested Mike be the guy, and he took some beautiful, beautiful pictures. And I said to the fellow in charge, I said, you ought to have him do a couple interviews with some of the people down there. He said, well, I don't know. I said, do you trust me? Yes. So he did one, and the one that I really liked, he had up on the screen web pages for racetracks, and it would be an aerial shot of the track, beautiful pictures, But he said to the crowd, he said, "How many of you in here are in the real estate business?" Well, what do you mean? Well, the pictures ought to be kids and fun and crashes and racing. And the 300 plus people in the audience they were stunned. It was really quiet. You could hear a pin drop. So the following year, and then he had several sessions after that, and just about everybody in there had changed their web page to something that was cars, kids, fun, and racing.
I saw a video of him speaking in Florida one time, and the one thing that stuck out to me, and I've talked to him about it since, is him talking about what are all these goofy, clever names that track promoters come up with for their different divisions. And the one that sticks out to me that I think he really stressed was, what in the world is a pony stock? So you're trying to sell racing, you're trying to sell tickets to people that maybe don't even know the racetrack is there. Do they think they're coming to see horses?
Yeah,
And Mike just drove that stuff home all the time because I mean, let's be honest, the man is brilliant.
he is. Now, people are wondering where he is. Well, he got a very, very good job in the private sector. I mean, an excellent job that he loves. But he indicated the last time I talked to him that his schedule may permit him to do some weekend announcing. So I'm hoping that that comes to fruition, and he could do some of that at Pittsburgh or Lernerville or wherever. He's so creative when he talks about things, and the
To,
people love it.
to be able to slide in behind a microphone of a track that you just got to a half an hour ago and know as much as he knows about the drivers and the track and everything else yet, just remarkable guy. Um, so let's move on to, well, we talked about this guy a little bit last week, got some nice comments back from him too, and that's Eric Westendorf. I'll reiterate what I said last time for anybody that missed it is I have always admired Eric for making a horrible situation into something that's, he just managed Dow's passing with such grace. I mean, here's a guy who was in the booth with the microphone in his hand literally a week after Dow Carnahan had passed away. And I mean, I know what it's like to follow Dow Carnahan, but I had a year of Dow's ear, being able to, email back and forth, and we spoke sometimes. This happened instantaneously, and a week after Dow's passed, here's Eric doing that job, and he's continued to do it with grace.
Let's rewind a little bit with Eric. When he first became the PR person at Lernerville, I had approached him about being a co-host on a show I was doing there for WEDO radio, and it was called Trackside at Lernerville Speedway. And first show was a little rough, but once he got acclimated to that, he did an outstanding job. And I can't help but think that maybe when it was time for him to be on the mic, he was a little more comfortable.
He also had the advantage. He said he told me this one time. He had the advantage of being able to work alongside of Dow right there in the booth, and
Right.
you can't help but pick up. When you're right alongside a master like him, you can't help but pick up some of what he does. And like I said, Eric's done it wonderfully and continues to do it. I mean, we're talking how many years now since Dow's gone and Eric's taken over, and he's done such a great job. So
Well,
another announce.
Lernerville Speedway is very lucky to have him.
Oh, I couldn't argue with that at all. I know he shared the mic a little bit with Gary Heeman when he was there. I think they went back and forth. Gary might have done two divisions, and Eric did two divisions, and
Right.
that to me harkens back to when Ed Schaefer was still at Lernerville, and he would do two divisions, and Dow would do two divisions. I
Right.
always thought that was kind of an interesting thing, and we'll speak to it in a moment. Or let's jump there now. Another track that had two announcers in the booth at the same time was Tri City, because I do remember Walt Weimer and Brian Spade both
Right.
being behind the mic at the same time. Are you aware of that?
Yes. Yes. And I was there on occasion when Brian and Walt were sharing the mic. It was a
And
nice combination. They kind of played off each other.
I think they complemented each other. And Walt's another one like you who's just has this wealth of information buried up in his head. And when he starts talking about anything that you have to talk about history. You have to look back when you look back, and he would weave that into his announcing style, and talk about back in the day when this guy's grandfather raced here or whatever. It's really great when somebody has that kind of a background.
Here's a Brian Spade story you'll like. Mike Lisakowski had a computer crash and he lost over 800 contacts. So he sent a thing to me and I sent him maybe 10 or 15 that I could, email addresses for him. And he gets a call from Brian Spade in reference to this. And Brian says, "Is this real or is this a scam?" Because Brian, being a lawyer,
Sure.
he's checking, dotting the I's and crossing the T's. He said, "No, it's not a scam. I just need some help." So we would want to tell anyone that's out there, if you have a decent contact list that you could send to Jim or me or Mike, it would help him resurrect his list. 820 some people. That's a lot of people to be looking for.
Yeah, it certainly isn't to lose them all at one time. My goodness.
Yeah.
So, a gentleman that I'm going to be talking to here in the next day or so, not a local announcer, although he has announced locally from time to time. I know I handed my microphone to Lenny Baticki on a Saturday night at Pittsburgh one time. You're actually the one that made the request. I couldn't have been happier to hand the mic to the guy that is as good as Lenny Baticki is.
Yeah, he also did some announcing when I was up at Jennerstown, and he's done a lot at Charlotte on the small track there with like the Bandoleros and car, the smaller cars. But my favorite Lenny Baticki story, I mean, you talk about somebody that's plugged into what's happening in racing. This had to be 8 or 10 years ago. They were having a function at the NASCAR Hall of Fame where all the teams were there, and Lenny was one of the co-leaders of the discussion, and you could raise your hand, and they'd bring you a microphone, and you could ask any one of the team owners or drivers or whatever a question, and they would answer it. So when that was over, I'm walking. There's like a bridge from one building to the other building, and I'm walking over to the workroom for the media. And I said, "Sir, what's your name?" He said, "Lenny Baticki." And I said, "Well, I just wanted to compliment you on what a nice job you did." And I had never met the guy. I saw him up on the stage doing his shtick, but it was amazing. And he said, "What's your name?" And not like I had never met him, never saw him before. I said, "I'm Don Gamble." He said, "Rapping on Racing. You could have knocked me over with a feather."
Yep.
I mean, here's this big shot from Charlotte Motor Speedway that knew who I was. Well, come to find out later, he knows who everyone is.
Yeah,
And we've
that's the
been
truth.
friends for probably over 10 years. Occasionally, he lives not far from me. We'll go to one of the local restaurants and have lunch and catch up on things that are going on. But the story I like the best, I don't know what track he was announcing at because he's everywhere. And someone mentioned that things were kind of slow at the concession stand, and the announcer's booth was above the concession stand. And he said, "I don't know about the rest of you, but I can smell that butter they're putting on that popcorn. That really smells good." Well, shortly after that, they sent someone up and said, "Stop talking about it. We ran out of
Oh,
popcorn."
that's funny.
Uh,
Yeah, that's a guy that could sell popcorn for sure.
yeah.
So another guy who's been around seemingly forever and has worked at multiple tracks. He's got his hand in helping people sell their race cars. He's owned race teams. He's a part owner of a harness racing team at the Meadows. Howie Bayless. This guy is everywhere.
Yeah, and during the season, he'll send me an email and he said, "I'm at the middle of nowhere Speedway. Do you want any interviews?" I said, "Howie, you know how to do this. Just pick what you think's important and send it to me." And that's how I get such a variety of interviews from, whether it be Roaring Knob, Jennerstown, Motorrome, Clearfield, Marion Center. But the part about being part owner of a harness racing team, I wasn't aware of that until last year. And when I talked to him recently, he said, "I found a way to be in racing and actually make some money." And I think last week his horse won a race. So
Oh, that's
he's in a
funny.
good place.
Yeah, and so there's another connection that not many people know about from auto racing and harness racing. When I first started in motorsports media, I worked for a gentleman named Jeff Zidek. He had started Motorsports Fan Report, and most people remember that being the little paper inside the truck mart. Well, when he shut that down, he was already working. I forget if he was a teacher or not, but he was at St. Vincent College. He ultimately became the sports information director at St. Vincent College, but he always had a little job on the side, which is now his full-time job. He is, well, he came after one of the masters as well. He is Roger Houston's replacement at the Meadows. He is the voice of the Meadows racetrack, is Jeff Zidek, and I think his son is following in his footsteps as well. So there's another little, connection, a little bit of connective tissue between harness racing and auto racing.
Hey, let's rewind. You mentioned sons. Lenny Baticki's son, Jacob, has been working his way up through the ranks as a person that does the cameras and the setups for all the different tracks. And Dirt Vision, I believe it's Dirt Vision, is going to hire him to handle all their stuff.
That's great. I mean, you're in the business, you're learning it, as a kid, and I know this is how Aaron got a lot of his interest in the sort of the technical side of what we do on the media. He's right there with you all the time. His son was probably likely with him quite a bit of the time, and that sparks the interest. And if you have a talent for it, why not?
Well, what Lenny told him, I mean, the kid is really good. And I'm thinking he's maybe 18 years old. And his dad, Lenny, told him, he said, by the time you're 20, you got to get out of racing. He said, what do you mean? He said, you got to get into something like baseball or football or whatever, because at 20-year-old in racing, you're going to hit a plateau and that's going to be it. But if you get into major league sports, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, that's not wrong. So we move on. Another guy who left us too soon. That was the announcer at Lernerville. I remember Mike Dutko announcing at Lernerville quite a bit. I don't think I made it to Mercer more than a time or two when he was up there, but he made his living at Lernerville and at Mercer. I think last week you talked about Mike Dutko uh, leaving Lernerville and going to Mercer because it was a couple of minutes ride instead of an hour and a half ride to get to the racetrack.
Right. He was reluctant. I said, Vicky Emig asked me if I knew anybody that would be a good announcer. Would you be interested in going there? So, I don't think so. I'm pretty comfortable here. How long does it take from your house to Lernerville? Maybe an hour and 15 minutes. How long does it take from your house to Mercer? And you could see the light going on. He said 10 or 15 minutes. And that's when he made the change. And he
Didn't
was
didn't
there
take
for a
that long to
long
figure
time.
that one.
And he was funny. He would come up with some of the strangest things. And he did a thing for rapping on racing for a long time called Backing In. And but when he first started listening to rapping on racing, I guess where he lived, the reception wasn't real good. This was prior to the streaming, and to hear the show, he had to park his truck in the yard and aim it at a certain tree to get the signal to hear the radio show.
Well, I will tell you a similar story. When Rap on Racing was on, when you moved to Monday nights on WEDO. Now Wixie wasn't as bad when it was in WIXZ 1360 of that East McKeesport station. That was
Right.
a Saturday morning show. That had a bit of a signal. WEDO is what we who know radio is called a daytimer, which means
Yeah.
the later it gets, the weaker the signal is, and then as soon as sundown hits, they have to shut their signal off altogether.
Right.
Well, I spent no small amount of Monday nights listening to Rap on Racing on a radio headset, mowing my grass, and angling my head in such a certain way that I could continue to get the listen to the show. Thank goodness for streaming. I mean, what a difference! How this has changed so much of what you do and I do and everybody does.
Well, what you're doing now, the reception and the audience just gets bigger every week.
So I mentioned Walt already. Any more thoughts on Walt? He's just been around for so long. He knows everybody. He knows everything.
He would be perfect, but I know he's to a point where he's not interested in doing a Zoom thing. So I guess we'll just have to fill in the blanks. Uh, whenever there's something we need to share with people about him. Now, he also spent some time behind the mic at Pittsburgh early on.
Hmm. Yeah, I've seen him comment on that a couple of times. This or that would have been going. So he would have been there before Dow.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
so that's Walt. We have a list of guys here we want to get to.
How
You
about
mentioned,
Randy May, the
yeah,
man
let's
with
talk about
the
Randy May. That guy. I mean, you just if you listen to Randy May, you couldn't not smile.
right? And I gave him the nickname, and it stuck. The man with the $1 million smile, because he could have done toothpaste commercials, because every time you saw him, he was smiling about something. And he started out announcing quad races, I think, at Challenger, and then he moved into the booth up there, and then we convinced them to come down and do some on track at Lernerville. Just a great guy.
If I remember correctly, when Dutko left Lernerville, that's when Randy slid in. Does that sound right to you?
That sounds correct. Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
he's another guy who, I mean, such a smooth delivery, so enjoyable to listen to. I mean, I could listen to Randy May read the phone book.
That's that's a good analogy. I don't think I ever heard that one. Yeah.
Someone that I have maybe met only ever once, and that's Jim Pollock, who spent most, if not all, of his announcing career at Sharon.
Well, occasionally he would do some one-on stuff at Expo, but you talk about dedication. Jim, for a long time, had back problems, and I would visit with him in the booth when I was at Sharon, and you could see that he was in serious back pain. I mean, just it was incredible, but he'd pull it all together, maybe take a Tylenol or whatever, and also very good in his delivery. He knew the drivers, he knew their sponsors, and he was a big part of the community down at in Sharon. Did an outstanding job. Well, as far as I know, he's still doing an outstanding job there.
Another one of these busiest men in racing, the voice currently and for a number of years now of Mercer Raceway, and that's Jim Ballantyne. Jim, I do know a little bit. We cross paths from time to time. We both worked for the same company for a while. He worked out at Pepsi up in Youngstown, and I was in Pittsburgh for a short time. Um, another guy, he's got his hand in so much. First class photographer, and now the announcer, and again for some time the announcer at Mercer Raceway Park. Another guy like Howie's sort of got his hands in everything.
Well, and also a big part of the Twin State Auto Racing fan club, where his dad is one of the maybe one of the directors with the Twin State Club. So Jim's the second generation. He and his dad, outstanding individuals. And Ballantyne's the same way. He's got like a photographic memory when he's doing Victory Lane with some of these drivers. Well, he'll refer back. Well, do you remember about a month ago when you won on the last lap, beating Joe Bag of Donuts? And the driver will look at him and say, "Yeah, I remember that, but that was a long time ago."
Yeah. That's people like that continue to amaze me. I mean, like we talked about Lisakowski being that way. Myself, I am unburdened by a good memory. I can't remember things from one day to the next, and to be able to do what these guys do is to me is remarkable. Any more thoughts on Brian Spade? We talked about him a little bit.
Yeah,
I always talk about him being my favorite lawyer.
yeah. He did Tri City, and now he's a big part of the Rush series, and he travels all around. Now, obviously, real life sometimes interferes with what you love to do, but when he can't do a Rush program, that's when they'll call Isakowski in to fill in for him. And since most of those don't interfere with Mike's regular job, it's kind of a nice pair there. I used to have I would have chats with his wife because he would be racing or he would be announcing at Tri City, and she'd be telling me stories about some of the behind the scenes stuff with racing and some of the things you can't repeat. But a lovely lady, and he's a lucky guy. Good job, good lawyer, very nice wife, and really putting it together with announcing. Now, I don't think he does anything at Tri City anymore, but I can't verify that.
So I do recall times when I was at Pittsburgh, and my entire tenure at Pittsburgh, the Rush Series had become part of the Pittsburgher weekend, and the Bill Hendren Memorial is a big one of the season-ending races for the Rush Series, the Rush Touring Series. Well, you say Brian having other things to do and can't make it. Well, he is not only a lawyer, he is the solicitor of Franklin, Pennsylvania, I believe, and because it's the time of year when it's homecoming. I think twice in my tenure at Pittsburgh, when we had the Rush Series in for the Pittsburgher weekend, Brian had to be in a parade. He's one of the local politicians that needs to represent his town in the parade. So, you get pulled several different directions when you're doing stuff like this, especially as we said the other day, Dow and Bill Steinbach, that was their occupation was to be on the radio. The rest of us, we have other jobs. We have things that are different than radio. And of course, Brian being an attorney, that certainly is different.
Well, I wasn't aware of him being a politician. He could maybe set the standard. There would be an honest politician, and that's a rare trait. So I'm glad you told me that. I had no
We'll have to
idea.
we'll have to get him a shirt that says that. That sounds good. Um, Another guy we lost way too young, and I always had a soft spot for Dave Kitty. When he bought RPM Racing News, or what it was, Racing's Almost Perfect magazine at the time,
Right.
and became RPM Racing News, I thought he did a marvelous job with that. Always did. Got out of racing for well, didn't get out of racing. He was announcing, but one of the things he did as a sideline, we'll talk about his announcing career too, is Kitty's cookies or Kitty's whatever they were. He was always baking. He was a master baking guy that went to all these different church bazaars and everything. I always had wanted to go. Sadly, he was all the way out in Greensburg, and it was just a little further than I needed to go buy a cookie. But Dave Kitty, really interesting guy.
Well, I had the opportunity on many occasions when I would visit with him to taste some of his cooking. And to say it was excellent is an understatement. But I would tease him. I said, are you sampling the products? Because he had an issue from time to time with his weight. But hey, I guess if you're cooking them and they smell good, why not?
Yeah,
But
Dave was not a small guy, and I think sadly that's a lot of what brought his demise about. I really miss him. He was always very kind to me anytime I had a chance to talk to him. It's such a nice guy, and very another one, very well spoken. Knew what he was talking about in the booth, and did a good job when he announced.
well, let me tell you why and how the sale of Racing's Almost Perfect magazine came to be. I'm guessing my daughter Carrie was maybe 10 or 12 years old. And we were living in Monroeville, and we had a basketball hoop on the side of the house. And she came in and she said, can we shoot some baskets? And I said, oh, Carrie, I got a deadline here with this magazine. I got to get this taken care of. And she bounced the ball and went out the door. The next day, a song came on the radio called The Cat's in the Cradle. Did you ever hear that song?
Absolutely.
And the next day, I sold the magazine. It,
Not a
it was
bad
just,
thing because you went on to some really more
oh,
important things, including family after that.
the memories that Carrie and I have were very, very close. And matter of fact, I was supposed to go to a game for my grandson today, but it rained out. It's what's the game called where you got a stick with a net on the bottom of it and you
That's
throw the ball?
lacrosse. Lacrosse.
Yeah, yeah. He's going to play lacrosse. Now, his brother, Noah, was real good in basketball, but he decided that he wasn't going to do that anymore. And the two of them have started a small landscaping business, Noah and Evan. And I'm kind
Nice.
of proud of them because their work ethic is amazing. But back to Dave, his father was a big part of local racing. I think at one time, the old Latrobe Speedway was run by his dad, and he owned some really nice cars. Matter of fact, I should put one of them up on Facebook. It was a former Joe Viglione 36 Chevy Coupe that had changed owners several times. It was Jim Vilsack's, And then Joe ended up running it himself as number 14. And then somewhere along the line, Dave's father bought it and put Raleigh Smith in it. So the car had a lot of history and won a lot of races. And then I think he has a cousin that writes for one of the local papers in the Latrobe area.
So we move back a little closer to home. Tyler Harris. You and I have a history with Tyler Harris. We touched on this last time. I was at Pittsburgh. Young guy, Tyler Harris. He's way younger than me. Had an opportunity. Always wanted to work in racing in some form or another. Had an opportunity to go to another racetrack and be their announcer. And at the last minute, in the sort of ultimate being tossed under the bus, they had put somebody else in his place. And I got a phone call from you the following week saying, "Hey, I got this young guy. Are you looking for any help at Pittsburgh?" And my answer is, "Are you out of your mind?" Yes, I'm definitely looking for help at Pittsburgh. And a guy who's this enthusiastic, who not only got sort of shoved to the side when he was at the other racetrack, he stuck around and said, "Well, what else can I do?"
Yeah.
Okay, that's the kind of work ethic I wanted to have working alongside of me. And ultimately, he became my replacement at Pittsburgh. And frankly, look at Pittsburgh now. I'm going to be there Saturday if the weather cooperates. Look at the place now and look where he has helped take it.
Yeah, it's amazing. It was a blessing when the other track threw him under the bus, or we wouldn't have him. It'd be, in some little short track somewhere that a lot of people don't go to. But in addition to being an outstanding announcer, he went to my alma mater, Cal State, and he took up design. I don't know what you'd call it, but when you look at some of the things that he posts for the Speedway, like this pot of gold, the artwork, and all the things that are contributing to the success of Pennsylvania Motor Speedway. And then, like, he put a thing up showing that they finally redid the road coming into the track, which was a challenge. And I think prior to that, they redid the road coming into the pits. I mean, the folks at 2020 Landscaping are lucky. Not only is he a big part of the track, but when he's not doing track stuff, he's working for 2020 Landscaping and handling in-house office stuff for the company.
Yeah, and 2020 landscaping, being a company that has a lot of big, scary-looking equipment, they have the means to do a lot of that. I remember the first day they were there, they had a Bobcat. If everybody remembers all the weeds that were, between where you'd go down the steps to the track, there was that hillside with just dreadful with weeds. I mean, I wouldn't want to be the weed whacker at all. Well, they had this Bobcat and a guy going straight up and down that hill with some sort of a brush cutter that is just absolute nightmare fuel. I mean, this thing was scary looking and going up and down and up and down. And I thought, boy, how nice is it that you have that equipment at your disposal where you can make this happen? And now they're using it again. Look at the new walls are going to be in place by Saturday. Tyler, is he has a shovel in his hand? No, he's not doing any of that. But when it comes to making people aware of what's going on at Pittsburgh and making people aware of what's going on the track when he's behind the microphone, he's in that next tier of people that are just that good.
And he's young. It's just the beginning. The sky's the limit. I mean, what he's been able to accomplish there, Blair Kress has to be pleased. Blair and Tabitha, they need to. I know they realize how lucky they are to have him.
And they're all very close in age, if I'm not mistaken. They're all
Yeah.
in their early to mid 30s. So yeah, the sky's the limit on what the future holds for Pittsburgh with the family, and then Tyler being there, who's effectively part of the family as well. When I was there working for the Mileys, the Mileys situation was different. They were all retired. There was no giant sum of money coming in from any outside source. There was no landscaping company, there was no equipment, there was no. They did what they could do, and I said this last week. I call myself a placeholder being there. Whether anybody agrees with that or not, fine. But I feel like we left the place in a pretty good way for the next generation of owners to come in and take over.
What amazed me about Kress and his company, I think they bought the track on a Friday, and I said, "Well, what are you going to do?" He says, "Well, tomorrow we're going to race." And Blair's philosophy was, I'm keeping everybody. They know what they're doing. We're just going to pick it up. And the next day they raced under the new ownership.
Yeah, there was none of this, I'm going to come in and take over stuff. It was this place has a good staff in place. Why am I going to mess it up? Go to work, keep the place running. In fact, Ty, to the best of my knowledge, Ty Miley's still working there.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
All right, Don, I think we've covered just about everybody. We're going to move on next time we do this. You and I spoke this afternoon. Have we exhausted your memory yet? I don't think so. I think I'd like to talk about drivers from all over Western Pennsylvania, maybe for a week or two. Again, the guys that I named to you on the phone today, anywhere from Herb Scott to Blackie to Lynn to Jeep Yakabuchi to
Lou Blaney.
brothers. Pardon me?
Lou Blaney.
Lou Blaney,
Yeah.
the two brothers, I can never remember their name. One died young. Your hero, Buddy O'Connor. So
Right.
let's start to think about that. Again, I'm giving you homework. Let's start to think about some of the drivers, some of the great stories behind the drivers, and we're going to continue this as long as people will have us. And so far, it sounds like everybody's enjoying this. So anybody that makes it out to Pittsburgh, come see me on it at Pittsburgh if the weather is agreeable, and tell me what you think about this program. You have been watching, once again, Speeding Through History. I'm Jim Zufall. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jim.